should I have
Welcome to Media Path. I'm Fritz Coleman.
And I'm Louise Palanker.
Here at Media Path, we look anywhere and everywhere to find content that we think you'll find enjoyable. Even if it's wrapped in a hefty bag in a Mar-a-Lago tool shed, we will find it. We highlight some recently released items that we think are worth your time. And then we get to the exciting part, talking with guests that we so admire, like singer-songwriter John Sebastian. John and the Lovin Spoonful helped shape the rock revolution of the 60s and have put honestly, some of the most beautiful songs of that era out into the universe. Can't wait to talk to John in just a few minutes. But first, Wheezy, what do you have? I know you've had a very tumultuous day today, and I want you to share it with us.
I had an interesting day, Fritz, and I wanted to just take a moment to celebrate the YouTube teachers. Okay. Because the YouTube teachers are they're just of service. So this morning, I tried to use my Keurig. Keurig is like the easy bake oven. It's like the easy bake oven of coffee makers. So I understand already that you have no sympathy for me if I'm using a Keurig. But the Keurig said to me, it said, back off. This thing's about to blow. There's water pressure we cannot contain. We don't want to be a party to what's about to happen to you. So, of course, I go to YouTube because that's what you do. They say refer to the instructions. You think I save instructions in an age of technology? No, because I go to YouTube. So there's a nice gentleman teaching me. Did you know that what's involved with cleaning out your Keurig is that you will need a paperclip?
Wow.
So we live in a very high-tech age, in a very high-tech world, and yet you still have somehow...
You think they'd give you a paperclip with the Keurig when you buy it?
They may have, and I threw it out with the instruction manual. So now I've got my Keurig on its side. I'm performing surgery. I'm apologizing. I'm saying this may pinch. But it didn't work the first time around. So I spent the first few hours of my day for its coffeeless. So
I'm glad I wasn't around to see that.
Right, and then after I got the show ready, I tried it again. Paperclip. Apparently, there's a needle that punctures your little pod, and then around that needle, there's like little holes that you're supposed to put your paperclip. So if you've performed the surgery at home and you have any additional tips, because when I finally got coffee, the Keurig was sort of saying to me, I don't really feel like it, because the water was just kind of like, I'm sort of coffee. I can't promise you anything. I told you I was about to explode, and now you still want coffee. So, yeah, we're open to Keurig tips, and we're grateful to all of the YouTube instructors that make our lives so much easier.
I think it's a scam. The YouTube instructors are a scam. It's a way that companies can forego the responsibility of having a customer service department. They just say, look it up on YouTube. And I had an experience like that, too. I have a wireless thermostat in my home that requires tabulation and some adjustment, and it depends. You have a remote and you have it, put it somewhere in your house. And so mine was broken. And I called this home heating and air conditioning place, and they said, we don't carry that brand, but I'll tell you, they have great instructional videos on YouTube on how to fix it yourself. And I empathize so much with John's struggle in getting on the air today, because that's the way I am with everything technological. And I went to YouTube and I gave up when it said, do you have an arc welder? And I said, no, I'm not.
Wow. So I needed a paper clip and you needed an arc welder.
I know.
All right.
Well, I empathize with you. Maybe we'll get some great suggestions.
Have you been watching any TV?
Yes.
Okay.
I know I'm going to open a large can of worms.
Please.
Entitled Harry and Meghan, currently streaming on Netflix and Hulu. The debate about this show is like a debate between Adam Schiff and Marjorie Taylor Greene. People are split, and the rift is mainly between the Americans and the Brits. This is a 6-part series. 3 have dropped, the other 3 December 15th. The series was designed by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to tell their real story, countering the false narratives portrayed in the British press. It starts out with how they met, Meghan's acting career, Harry's renegade early life, their engagement, the nuclear bomb of British tabloid coverage, starting only 12 days after it was announced they were dating. And UK critics have uniformly panned this series. Many Brits feel like the two wanting to resign from the firm, as it's called, was nothing short of treason, an assault on the family. How dare you? Some former British leaders even said they should not be allowed to attend the King's coronation. Get over it, Lord Snoot. unstiffen your upper lip. I stand firmly on the side of Harry. The film looks at his early age, dabbling in recreational drugs, being a rebel, unlike William, who seemed to buy into the family program from the start. From the day he was born, Harry was assaulted by the British press. He's known nothing different ever in his life. Then he met and got serious with Meghan, and it became really, really different. And the difference was race. The tattlers in the tabloids were relentless about Meghan's mixed race. Her mother black, her father white. Headlines like straight out of Compton. She wasn't born or raised or lived in Compton. Princess in the hood. She was not raised near the hood. She lived on the Wilshire corridor. Brutal and scary. Eventually, things intensified to even death threats. Princess Diana died in 1997, being chased by the paparazzi, allegedly. Harry saw this nightmare beginning to replay itself with his wife. He bowed out of the royal life simply to protect his wife and family. My sympathies are with Harry. It took amazing guts to quit the firm, to give up his identity, to be iced by a judgmental family. This is the greatest example of the adage, you can't pick your family. And I would say that Diana, somewhere right now, is very pleased with her son's activities.
Yes, I'm watching it as well, Fritz. I'm obsessed like any good royal watcher. The thing for me was that I was wondering if the Meghan, the reaction to Meghan alongside Brexit, alongside Trump, alongside people feeling like whatever is in the back of their mind, they can put it on their lips and put it on the internet, whatever kind of racist undertones. I mean, even Harry talks about how we all have bias, unrecognized bias, or we all, because we're all born one person and we see the world through that person's eyes. But, he even admits that he has he needs to keep learning.
I thought that was really honest of him. He was talking about his own racial bias early in his life, but I think that was the way it was brought up, the environment in which he was brought up.
But why can't we all just continue learning? What is so threatening about that?
Yep.
And so, I'm a fan, and they're also my Santa Barbara neighbors. So, if they need anything, we're there. We've got a lawnmower.
You could have called him about the Keurig machine and saved yourself a lot of
Maybe he had
problems.
a paperclip and I would have been right over.
Probably.
Oh, is it my turn to talk about
Yes,
something? Okay. We're two Harrys strong. I'm just going to make that proclamation. Two Harry strong this week. I'm recommending the documentary Harry Chapin, When in Doubt, Do Something, which I found on Amazon. It's playing on a bunch of places, including iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. Award-winning singer-songwriter Harry Chapin, the master story song stylist who brought us Taxi and Cats in the Cradle, used his time and talent on this earth to address world hunger and poverty. His efforts inspired, enriched, and saved the lives of millions of people. This film features appearances by Pat Benatar, Sir Bob Geldof, Billy Joel, Robert Lamb, Daryl DMC McDaniels, Kenny Rogers, Pete Seeger, Bruce Springsteen, and Harry Belafonte, bringing our Harry total to 3 if you are keeping score at home. We also hear from Harry's wife and his siblings and his kids, all very young still, because when we lost Harry in 1981, he was just 38 years old. Much like this week's guest, John Sebastian, Harry Chapin grew up in a musically gifted, artistically expressive Greenwich Village family. And just like John, he was a son of a well-known musician. Harry Chapin was driven to create and to serve. He could only relax when he was in motion. He performed half of his shows for charity, attempting to both donate his time and serve as an example and an inspiration for us to do the same. Harry gave so much of himself to critical causes that he took precious time from his family, but he couldn't stop. It was how his engine ran. And Harry did not limit the donation of his efforts to charity events. He also founded the grassroots organizations Why Hunger and Long Island Cares. And he spent time in D.C. lobbying and forming alliances with politicians. He advocated for and was appointed to the Presidential Commission on Hunger under Jimmy Carter in 1977. When he had, he gave. And inspired by Harry Chapin, we at MediaPath will be using our voice to partner with worthy causes. Who needs our help to keep helping this week, Fritz?
Well, I'm so glad you're giving me the opportunity to talk about an agency that I have been involved with for many years. I'm on the board of directors. I mean, we're into the holidays, and in the spirit of the season, you might be looking for a way to offer help to folks who need it. Well, I want to tell you about the Children's Burn Foundation. In just an instant, a child's life can be shattered by a serious burn. Without access to comprehensive care, that child and their family will suffer devastating physical, financial, and emotional harm. The Children's Burn Foundation provides child burn survivors and their families comprehensive care from surgeries all the way to psychological support. We also offer burn prevention and education for both kids and parents. These are kids from all over the world. We provided support for child burn victims from the war in Syria and are currently doing for the conflict in Ukraine. And this time of year, we like to ensure that child burn survivors are able to escape the stress of their surgeries and treatments and find happiness and normalcy. So every year, 500 child burn survivors and their families gather together, and they have festivities and receive food and drinks and toys from very generous donors. We would love for you, if you're going to make a donation this holiday season to help people out, this is a great look. Please go to their website and learn more about it. It's really very inspirational. Go to childburn.org, and you can learn all about their heroic work, and we hope you'll push the donate now button. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fritz, for sharing that with us. Let's introduce our guest.
I can't wait to do this. I've just been an admirer of this guy for many years. We're very excited. He's a singer and a songwriter. He's a harmonica player, and for those of us that played the harpsichord in high school, he finally made that instrument hip. He and his band, the Lovin Spoonful, have given us some of the most memorable songs of the 60s. Do you believe in magic? You didn't have to be so nice. Did you ever have to make up your mind? Summer in the City. And of course, the huge hit, Welcome Back, Kotter. My favorite heartbreaking song, we were talking about it before the show, Darlin Be Home Soon, Melts My Heart, and Nashville Cats. Such a clever song. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2000, into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2008. Their first 7 hits were top 10 on Billboard. They did that during the blitzkrieg of the British invasion. He received 4 Grammy Awards, 38 ASCAP Awards. We don't have time for any more accolades because we're almost out of time now. Please welcome the very talented John Sebastian. John, so nice to have you with us.
And thank you very much. It's terrific to join you all.
I want to say that
I like it that even when we do one of these affairs, that there's somebody with a cell phone.
Of course.
There's like an extra producer here.
That is our producer.
Well, how else do you know what happened?
Okay, I won't make fun then.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
of
no,
course you
that's
should
okay.
make fun. Of course you should.
Anyway, the Spoonful was a combination of roots music and pop and country and blues. And as I mentioned, you were able to be successful during the Beatles era, which was daunting. And you made a great...
Beatles, Beach Boys.
Yeah. All that.
Motown.
I was just thinking in terms
I'll
of the
go
British
with that
invasion.
those three.
Yeah,
Beatles, Beach Boys,
absolutely.
Motown.
And you made a great comment about that. You said, we were grateful to the Beatles for reminding us of our rock and roll roots, but we wanted to cut out the English middleman and get down to making this music with an American band, which is a great way to describe what you do. You know, the Brits introduced us to our music, blues. You know, the Beatles, the Stones, Yardbirds, Led Zeppelin all introduced us to the blues. And I just love that comment. What was that era like? What was there pressure on you to produce at that time?
You think?
Yeah.
It pretty was. I mean, there was no pressure until I had a successful record.
There you go.
Logically enough. So when that happened, what it was the combined wonderfulness of having an audience cheering you on, but also to have a skilled gonif telling you, John, we need another record. Do you believe in magic? It's going down on the charts now, you know? Yeah, I think we got to need another one. We got to be just like that.
Let's go back for a moment to your early childhood, because it sounds like the childhood that we would all want. You grow up with all of these fascinating people around you. Your godmother is Vivian Vance. Eleanor Roosevelt lives across the hall. Burl Ives and Woody Guthrie are coming over. I just want to feel for a moment what that was like for a child to grow up with all those wonderful influences.
Well, you have to remember that I didn't come with all of those preconceptions of any of these people. So all I was doing was reacting like, here's a guy. He came over to our house. Oh, he can play the guitar. Mm-hmm. This is wonderful. or Woody Guthrie staying for a week because I think he got kicked out of his house. And I'm listening to him. And I remember I was about 5. Remember, I'm really little. But I listened to Woody Guthrie. And I say to myself, not as good as my dad.
Wow. I love
And
that.
your dad was a classical harmonica player and composer.
I was listening to 6 to 8 hours of practicing a day.
Wow.
And that's a greater skill. Songwriting is its own great skill, but when we get into music, even a 5-year-old can say, "Oh yeah, that's more magical."
Now, I have a harmonica question because everyone gets a harmonica when they're a kid, and most of us do not learn how to play it because you realize that when you're blowing in, it's one note. When you're blowing out, it's another note, and then you tap out because you're confused. Now, is each harmonica in a different key?
In a different key.
Like when you buy a harmonica, is it in like the key of C, and then if the song was in a different key, you'd need to use a different harmonica?
Yeah, the answer to your question is yes, that especially if you're playing the instrument that I play, which is a very simple children's diatonic harmonica, that is very, that's a very straightforward do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do instrument.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to an instrument that my father and Matt Honer had a great effect on improving, you come to what's called the 64 chromatic, which is a chromatic instrument, so that it goes ba da 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 da. It's really
half notes and stuff like that.
Yes.
So how did your father go about improving it? I think this is fascinating.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here, which is those diatonic harmonicas. I need 11 of those to be able to step on a stage where I don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Okay.
But a chromatic harmonica, and add my dad, he could play in any key quite comfortably.
Wow.
Did he play in a Philharmonic, being a classical harmonica player, or was...
No, but he did play with the Philharmonic I think, I'm not sure which of several compositions we're talking about.
So where did he get most of his work? Where was he needed?
Well, Dad began a successful musical career pretty early. He was 16, and he was already the soloist, the Philadelphia Marching Band.
the Mummers Parade.
The most famous composer of marches.
Oh, John Philip Sousa?
John Philip Sousa,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So anyway, this was John Philip Sousa's harmonica orchestra.
Wow.
And Dad was the soloist.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
So that was where that began. But Dad had several years as I don't know quite how you'd put it. He was very handsome, and he could work all of these clubs in the village, particularly. And eventually, he became a sort of a darling of the State Department, because he could work with one pianist, and he would be glad to play in an African village where the only thing you were just standing on where the dirt had been really beaten down by feet, and that was your stage. So he played there, and he played Cambodia as it was making its Vietnam transition, and I used to have a great big sign that said his name, and I think it was in Vietnamese, but it read John Sebastian. It was
cool.
really,
Oh, wow.
it was very phonetically done.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, your family is just rife with talent. Your father was a classical harmonica player, and your mother wrote for radio.
Remarkable woman.
So is it too much of a stretch to say you got your music from your dad and your storytelling from your mom?
You could certainly say that, and you could also say that if I didn't come up with something good, I was really an idiot.
No pressure, but go for it. But you swang for the bleachers, and probably everybody who knew you, all of these people that were mingling around like Eleanor Roosevelt, probably thought that you were such a clever boy, I'm sure. But I want to hear a Vivian Vance story. Was she a good godmother? What did she get you? Were there any good gifts involved here?
Vivian Vance was the best godmother that a guy could have. First of all, she loved me, and I think part of it was that she did not have children, and I was sort of a stand-in as her best friend's son.
Oh, that's so
and so I did hear a lot of stories. I will tell you one, which was, I guess I was about 11, and Viv had called up and said, "Hey, Janie, I'm coming to visit you out there in Huntington, Long Island." And she shows up, and immediately out of the back seat, she produces a kid shotgun.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and this shotgun is really works well, and there just happens to be gravel underfoot right there, right when she hands it to me. Of course, I put the gravel, I pump it up, and I hit it. And at that point, I hear my mother going, "Viv, I can't believe you did this. You know how we feel about weaponry and teaching children that this is a good idea." And there's a pause, and she says, "Jane, you know that when he grows up, he's going to like me better."
Oh, man.
And was that true?
Yeah.
A little bit.
You know, your father started or played at least early in his career in Greenwich Village, as did you at the start of the folk revival era. And you got to see people like Leadbelly and Mississippi John Hurt and all the guys that were responsible for the start of the folk revival. But starting in the same spot where your father worked seems to be a magical connection that you must have had with your father. Was it hard to do that, or was it inspirational?
I was certainly inspired by listening to somebody play that well, and I was inspired, and I was listening every minute when he would do things like instructional records. There were several John Sebastian teaches you the harmonica type records, and I heard them all, but there was not a direct connection about the harmonica at that point. Dad was just wonderful about it, because there was a point when I went to him and said, "Dad, you know, everybody, when I play the harmonica, they want to know if I'm going to be like you, and I can't be like you. I already knew that at like 6." I knew that. And he was so good at cooling me out. He said, "Look, you're going to play the way you play. People say that because it's an easy thing to say. Mm-hmm. Don't let it get you down." Oh. And so I really took that to heart, and I think that, I really never had anybody comparing me to my dad, because we were in such different games. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first couple of records that I was an accompanist on, I made sure that I used an alias.
Oh.
Yeah, because I didn't want anybody thinking, "Oh, that great harmonica player. He's slumming now. What happened?
Because your names
This
are so
poor
similar.
guy.
Yeah. Wow.
You're a junior, right?
Not really. I have a middle name,
yeah.
and my dad was quite anxious that I not be a junior.
So did he support your transition to the dark side of rock and roll?
He was quite unsure, but he was not. It was very different than my pals who were also playing music, whose dad might be a butcher or a baker or whatever, and have no frame of reference for that this could be a successful avenue, that the gratification that you would get would be a component of this success, that it isn't all just, I could make this much money doing this. My dad had a lot to teach.
And tell me when you recognized that songwriting would be something unique that you could bring.
That started quite by accident. I think I was going to Blair Academy, and we were doing a Shakespeare play, and there's a song in there that they just refer to the rain, it raineth every day. And I realized that if I used some folk chords that I knew, I could come up with a way to sort of sing that song in the middle of the play. And it worked. And so then cut to, I'm working in a little jug band, and it's 63 or so, and I'm playing in this band, and we're learning these tunes from the 30s and 40s, and some of these jug band tunes are they're pretty rough as far as the language, and so there were times when we'd go, we can't say that. And so the next thing that would happen is I'd end up sitting with a yellow pad and going, we could say this. And so suddenly there were several of these kind of tunes, because I was now in this little jug band, and there were these opportunities to just like flex your muscles for a fraction of a second and then done. And so really that was the beginning, doing that regularly. Then some time or another, I said, I'm going to write a song. I love high-heeled sneakers, so I'm going to write it a lot like that.
Wow.
And it was called Good Time Music, and it ended up that Cass Elliot liked it, and I ended up, let me let my dog out.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Go ahead. I just love the sound of his voice. He sounds so familiar, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. I remember hearing that announcement at Woodstock, and that you couldn't see him, but you could hear him.
Right. I think at Woodstock he also got up to let his dog out. It didn't make the film, but it happened.
Hey, John, I've been fascinated my whole life with that whole Greenwich Village scene, and always wanted to go. Yeah, I mean, it was the folk revolution, and it was also sort of this growing ground for early comedians, Woody Allen and Bill Cosby and David Fry and all these guys. I mean, what a cool time to be in that part of town. Can you describe the feeling and what it was like, and some of your classmates during that era? Dylan was just getting his legs then, and some of the other people you worked with.
Well, it was a very, very rich time. And I mean, you mentioned two comedians, and I have to tell you, when I first heard Richard Pryor, and that was only because I was beginning to be allowed in the back of several of these clubs, Richard Pryor was doing a Bill Cosby routine. He didn't have any material yet.
Wow.
And he was listening to Cosby, and then go to a less visible club and do the act. And I actually knew another pal of mine who's a pot seller who pretty much had the same strategy. He'd either go listen to Cosby, or he'd go downtown and there were several comedians at that point that were.
Nobody made any money. It was pass the hat, and you hoped you made a couple of bucks on any given night. It was
just a cover act.
Yeah.
Well, there was a division in there because there were really those two types of strategies to have a club. And one was an actual club where you were actually paying people, and the other was getting around the cabaret laws. And that was done by saying, well, we can't pay you, but we can't pass the hat. We got a little basket, and we'll pass it at the end of your set.
Well, when you went on for the first time, according to Wikipedia, you then had to get off and regroup and replace your drummer. So tell us that story.
Had to replace our drummer.
Well, the story on Wikipedia is that your first performance was not maybe as well tuned as it needed to be, and then Joe Butler joins, and then you take another go at it.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that kind of how it happened?
It's in quotations, but it'll be fine.
All right. Well, what's your memory of getting on stage for the first time and how that felt?
Well, Zal Yanovsky and I already had a kind of a bond by the time that we started doing that, and we were actually playing as a duo, in these little folk clubs, just sort of going, what happens if we get on stage together? And what we found quickly was that Yanovsky was the show. Mm-hmm. All I had to do was keep the time and try to remember the damn song and stuff like that. So that was really key. We met Steve Boone through Skip Boone, his older brother, who was a member of a group called the Sellouts, which were making fun of the folkies, because we were all in the Village, and there was only one rock and roll band, and that was the Sellouts. And because they're going, we're, you guys are so traditional and everything. So it was a kind of it was a comic situation.
I see.
So is that how the Lovin Spoonful was born? Out of those, you just added guys gradually, and it became the group?
Yeah. It probably took 4 or 5 months of looking around, and then we did work for about a half a year, very, very steadily, 8 shows a night.
Holy cow! How long were the sets?
About 45 minutes.
Holy cow, that's incredible.
Wow.
And no, we got that. So that's when the Birds came to town and they heard us. Michael Clark comes over to us. He goes, "Man, you guys are really good. I wish I was in your band, because we're in a band, but it's not like your band." And I was going, "Hey, man, in New York, we don't start with the big confession here. This is not really the way things operate very often."
So it's just a matter of stage time and just working it out until you get good.
Well, yeah, that was the difference, was that Roger McGuinn had a lot of background, but as a band, they had very little at that time.
Well, I'm very interested in group dynamics, and when idealistic young kids form a group and have a hit record, it's like two people having a baby. You're forever linked, but then the pressures mount and you grow in different directions. And as the songwriter, you have maybe a bit more control of the legacy. But talk for a moment about the experience of growing into your grown-up self or your grown-up selves while you're inside a successful band. Tell us how that feels. It seems like it's a lot.
Well, I think I had a tremendous amount of help from my father at this stage, because he was the first guy to say, "Yeah, everything's going great, but here's the thing you have to know, which is that audiences keep shifting. It's a slow tectonic process, but they're always moving, and they will move past you. So be prepared for that moment, save your money and don't get bent out of shape when they go, oh, well, what? You turned into a sensitive singer-songwriter. We're not interested in that, Right. So all of these various stages, I think it really helped to have my dad's input on that.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I've wanted to ask you this question ever since we talked to Felix Cavalieri, who was fantastic. He said that he and the Rascals were in charge of Lower Manhattan, and you and the Spoonful were in charge of Upper Manhattan. What did that mean?
Well, that's a joke that we began to have after, being exposed to each other. I would go up to the 40s, and they would be playing some semi-nasty topless club. And the thing was that at that stage, it was Felix and Dino and nothing else. And it was, you opened the door to this club and it was like a train coming at you. It was like huge. And I remember me and Yanofsky going, I think we better practice.
Wow.
That's what I think. And well, Felix and I, remember, we're both Italian, and we sort of come from that sort of in Italy they call it Italo-Americanaccio. It's not flattering, so we've both had this background of Italian American everything, parenting, food, all of that, and then also I understood the Rascals' weird thing. I don't know how I can explain it. I said, this is an Italian thing. When suddenly they're having problems, the one guy doesn't want to talk to the other guy. I said, this
like a
sounds
typical
like
Italian family problems.
It sounds like two guys in the piazza, It really does.
Yeah, but now when you've got all this pressure, and then the music industry is run by grown-ups, and you guys are a bunch of kids trying to figure out not just how to create great music and create a great presentation, but also how to deal with financial issues as a cohesive unit with all of the same opinion. And that's just not going to happen as kids continue growing up. So how did you guys work out what to do? Did you have a good manager? You had your dad, but did you have good guidance for the band?
Well, yeah, I do think the dad and mom thing really helped me. And we did have a good manager. He was still learning, and he apologizes whenever we get together that he didn't know more when we started. But the fact was that Bob Cavallo, who went on to run Walt Disney Records, and then before that he was the president of Warner Brothers, then of the record company, and then so his advice became more and more sound as time went on. And we also had Eric Jacobson as our producer, and that can't be minimized. People think, the Beatles and their guy. Well, this was our guy, and Jacobson had a pretty darn good idea of what this Lovin Spoonful idea was all about. He'd been in a bluegrass band himself, very urban background, kind of a bluegrass band in Chicago. And so he was already, somebody was curious about music and curious about all varieties. So, he wasn't shocked when we put down electric instruments and took up a long neck 5-string banjo and put it in a rock and roll tune.
You guys were
or an auto harp, for that matter.
You were so eclectic, and that seemed to be what you celebrated, was all these different types and presenting it to folks so that they could have a taste.
I agree with that 100%. And also, that's the reason why nobody copied you. Your sound is so distinct. in the first 4 notes of a song when it comes on the radio, you know what you're listening to. It was a very distinct song.
You know, this is funny to hear you say this, because I remember when we'd have finished maybe one project and be on to the other. And immediately the first thing that any of us would say was, okay, we want to sound like a different band. Here, Yanofsky, you take my Les Paul, I'll take your Guild Thunderbird. No, really, we used to do that because we didn't have multiple guys. We didn't have Hal Blaine and company, doing our dirty work for us. We had to figure out a way to do it ourselves.
Oh, then your voice came on, and there was no question about who you were listening to. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, but
That's funny.
I'm going to ask you a very esoteric question here, but it's something that I've thought about. So during the folk revival, say the early 60s, the folk music became the voice of opposition against what was going on in the world. Vietnam, the civil rights movement, crooked politics. And the youth of America were just trying to carve out their own path. And artists like Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and Joan Baez and Bob Dylan. It just seems like in our dark world right now, it would be the perfect time for a musical voice to step forward and sort of represent this era, but there doesn't seem to be one. What do you think that is?
We got stupider.
Well,
we don't have civics. We've had to chicken out of teaching our children civics because we're also, I'm from this side and you're from that side, and so we can't agree on what we're going to.
Critical race theory, that ends that discussion.
We're teaching them cynics.
I know. Yeah, cynics. That's very good.
But I also think it's because we're not all looking in the same direction. There's not a central town square where there was with a few radio stations in town. The chart was the chart. If you were on the top 40, everybody knew those songs, and I mean everybody. Your mom knew the songs. Your neighbor knew the songs. Everybody was listening to the same music. There's too many places to look, so it's hard to find that one leader that can take us out of the wilderness.
And lyrics seem to have much more impact back then. You listen to what people were saying.
Well, his lyrics were not just phenomenal; they were also clever and fun and true. So it's like you did not take the easy pathway to any kind of rhyming schemes or any kind of thoughts that you were conveying. They're all really well thought out and clever. And they hold up. They're as fun to listen to now, as they were the moment people first heard them.
You agree?
I'm not going to disagree. I do have to say that a lot of this came just like a casual idea. He smokes a roach and he gets a little idea and it becomes a song. Maybe it's not. It isn't. Really, yes, I did feel a certain pressure, but I was not. I had never responded well to pressure. That's why I was such a bad student. So that really was a fairly big component.
Yeah, I think the lyrics are really stand out. That would be the one thing that I would say identifies John Sebastian.
I would say parenthetically that a lot of these tunes, their beginnings didn't really come from me. They came from me trying to get Yanofsky to laugh. See, because
so interesting.
Zalman was the funny guy. So I saw my job, especially when I was working on a tune like Pow or a tune like Nashville Cats. It just, first of all, okay, we're going to talk about these guys and we're going to say so. Let's start with a really awkward number. Okay, that'll make Yanofsky laugh. Good. Okay, 16,800. Yeah, because that doesn't sound like a rehearsed number.
What was the exact number?
1,652.
And it has to be 5 times that now because the entire music industry has moved to Nashville.
But there's enough nerds.
Are you talking about the
to
number of
look
guitar pickers in Nashville?
Yes.
All right, we have to identify what the number signifies.
So
yes.
look, so there are enough nerds that are interested in this kind of stuff that I got a call once from a guy who said, you know that song Nashville Cats you wrote? He says, that number wasn't that far off. I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, we actually went to the files in the Nashville Musicians Union, and we counted the guitar players. And apparently I was like 400, within like 300 or 400
Not
off.
bad.
Yeah,
That's
like
crazy.
a couple of
that
guys
was
had just
fun.
moved in, and some others moved out, and like you were pretty close.
But the whole industry, not even country's moving down there now. That's just like the place to record now, apparently. Am I right about that?
Boy, oh boy.
It's a small town.
you know.
It's a small music town for that.
So your show, Folk Rewind, is airing coincidentally this week. It's been 3 weeks in a row on
A
PBS.
lot of white guys on that show.
I'm telling you, and it's in black
only
and
thing-
white, so it's startling.
No. When I finished it, because I was not a creator there. I was a talking head.
What year was that?
So I did the thing, and as I was leaving, I said to the two producers, I said, black folks were doing a lot of wonderful things during this period too, and boy oh boy, had they managed to skip it.
Couldn't slip Odetta in there or anybody.
It just felt like it was maybe 10 years. I just watched it last night. It felt like it was maybe 10 years old. What year was that done?
I don't know.
It could be
because one of the things about that was an afternoon in not Philadelphia. It was in Pennsylvania. Anyway, it was
because
Pittsburgh.
it was T.J. Lubinsky who was the producer of that show.
And you had Barry McGuire. I'm not sure when he passed. So there's a lot of cool stuff. I love the clips. The clips
man.
from.
Great history.
Let the dog in here.
I mean, the dog's ready to come back in. The reunions are awesome, but the clips are just phenomenal.
No, I know they are. They're such poor, quaintly poor quality. But I want to tell him a story about. I just watched it again the other night, and I laughed because the Kingston Trio was on there.
Oh, that's
I got to
so
tell you a story about the Kingston Trio, John. My mother, who is an uber Caucasian, right? She used to buy me an uber white woman from suburban Philadelphia. Didn't know any colored people personally.
She's fancy.
Yeah, she was fancy. So she used to buy me every single Kingston Trio album, not so much for the music, but she thought that they looked like clean-cut boys on the album covers with their button-down shirts and their flat-top hairstyles.
Yeah.
And I was happy to have them because they had classic songs like Ride on the MTA and Tom Dooley, but secretly I was spending my allowance money on R&B albums like Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, singles like The Silhouettes, Get a Job, which scared the hell out of my parents. But as long as I continued to accept the Kingston Trio records, I was in good shape.
That's right.
But you made a
Bob Shane.
Yeah, you made a great comment on one of the folk rewinds about the beautiful voice quality of Glenn Yarborough and the Limelighters.
Mm-hmm.
Such a spectacular voice he had. And that's what I think is really recognizable in those old clips, as bad as they are, sort of old school visually. The sound was really phenomenal. And the harmonies were unbelievable.
And it's so cool that kids back then were just so into vocal harmonies, and that's what they were attempting on street corners, whether it be in one neighborhood or another neighborhood. That was a way to stand out, whether you were trying to get a deal at Motown or whether you were a Kingston Trio. It was like perfecting those harmonies. Is that something that you guys worked hard on, getting right your harmonies?
No,
just came naturally.
No. It really, we weren't good.
Oh, you weren't good.
That wasn't our strong suit.
Okay.
No, when we had 85 takes and we could have the time to do it, that's great, and we did it. Mm-hmm. But there, for example, you didn't have to be so nice. Wouldn't have been nearly as cool if not for the assistance of Henry Diltz, the famous photographer.
Henry Diltz was in the studio with you when you did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Henry's background was in a group called the Modern Folk Quartet, which was a very advanced vocal group. They're really, really good.
You mentioned Hal Blaine earlier. Did you ever use session musicians in any of your recordings?
When the Lovin Spoonful did a soundtrack to a movie, that was, and this is Francis Coppola, and he wants some orchestral type music, and so
what movie
that requires studio musicians. That requires people who play things that the Spoonful didn't play. So on that project, yes, but no. I got a chance to work with Hal Blaine when I did Cass Elliott's album, but not. No, we didn't cheat. We didn't cheat.
Well, no, but I don't know if it's cheating. It's just, I think it's
cheating.
Okay, all right. You guys on the East Coast,
I love it when they're going to do
cheating.
They're doing a Beach Boys album, and the Beach Boys come in to play, and Brian says, "No, you go home. We got this handled."
No, I know you're saying it's cheating, but like a lot of guys signed deals, and they thought that they were going to get to play. They'd show up with their instrument, and then they'd be told, "No, that's not how this works." So I think they, their intentions were good, but they had their way of.
Luckily, I didn't have those idiot producers to deal with. So I had Eric Jacobson, who was on our side very much.
That's your guy.
Where did you record?
Well, we recorded wherever we could. It is not, a lot of the preconceptions about rock and roll stuff in the early 60s. It's more or less based on a framework of almost 1970, because at 65 was really, it was just a different world. It had not exploded. Frampton Comes Alive had not sold a platinum album. That had never happened. So the whole business was becoming much bigger. And we adapted to it pretty good.
I think amazing. I'm watching on YouTube. You guys seemed to be a Sullivan favorite. You were on Ed Sullivan a lot. And when you sang Darlin Be Home Soon, there's an orchestra behind you. Can you tell us the story of how that came to be?
Well, we had now done You're a Big Boy Now, the movie. And one of the things that happened as a result of that was that a song I'd written got an orchestral chart, which had never happened before. And we had wonderful input from the producers of that project were different. That Eric Jacobson was involved, but there were other people that were also involved in that.
And then did they come up with the idea that when you perform this on Sullivan, you should have an orchestra?
I think what it was that we had the charts now.
Okay.
I think that was key. Here we were with the charts, and here's the Ed Sullivan Show, and when it's on the record, it has that chart on it. So let's get these guys. Wow. Let's get Fathead Newman. I mean, that was an amazing band.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
Fathead was in that band, was playing that day.
Really?
I'm afraid I may be a little late for me to come up with the names, but boy, oh boy, that was really a first class. They were, jazzers that would do sessions.
So that's ahead of when the Moody Blues were performing with an orchestra. That seemed like that was a hybrid that maybe you guys were on the cutting edge.
That we were on what?
Cutting edge of like, rock and roll music playing with orchestral backing, ahead of the Moody Blues. Even I'm not sure what year that happened.
Can't really take credit for that, but
I think you ought to. I mean, I'd say go ahead and give yourself.
What are your thoughts on the current state of the music industry, like the streaming and the different delivery systems and all that, John?
I have lost track completely. I am no longer anything like an authority on how music comes to be. I literally, like me and Arlen Roth made a lovely album during the COVID period. And we had what we considered to be a lovely project. And I forgot where I was going with this.
Was that the one where you're doing versions of your songs, folk acoustic versions of your songs?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. It was pretty much a two guitar project that had a bass player and a drummer occasionally, and we also had the Mona Lisa twins, which is a marvelous duo that you guys will have the opportunity eventually to research, because I think they're really an important band. These are two twin sisters, and they are remarkable. Their father was a producer in Vienna going back 30 years. So they just were able to start making records pretty much. Anyway, a remarkable couple of folks who really helped with stuff like background.
So when you went ahead and made this album over the pandemic, how did you go about putting it out there and letting the world know about it?
That just eventually we found a record company that would accept it. We'd already started, so we knew pretty much what it was, and I think anybody that was remotely interested could hear what it was. There wasn't much of a mystery to it, so I think that helped.
Now, I recently watched a clip from Wild Honey Show where you're outlining the origin story of Summer in the City. Can you share that with us? How that song was written?
Well, my brother wrote a song called Summer in the City, and it had a fabulous chorus. And so I started taking the song apart a little bit and rewrote the beginning. But his chorus was so good that I didn't want to screw with that. So that But at Night It's a Different World that's my brother.
Oh, okay.
And then, and then there's that funny little segment, bing, 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 that little section there.
Yeah.
Well, that was a thing that Steve Boone had been playing on the black keys of the piano for months. He'd been playing it. We'd get in the studio, and while we're waiting to do something else, we'd hear bing, 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 bing. We go, Stephen, that's not a song. It's not a chorus. It's not a verse. Please, of course, what happened was we finish the, But at Night It's a Different World. And we're looking, there could be some kind of a little musical interlude. Stephen goes, bing, 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 bing. We go, oh no, it fits beautifully.
That's awesome.
So in sales, I'm going to take a guess at this, and I could be wrong. Welcome Back, Kotter was the biggest hit, and then Summer in the City.
Yeah, and remember, Welcome Back is, these things get conflated, but that was in 1976. That was a long time after the Spoonful was long gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually, I will share with you that it was a tremendous victory for me, because I had almost been dropped by Warner Brothers.
Wow. In other words, you were commissioned to write that song, right?
Yes.
But it's the kind of lyric that is useful, and so that song is continuously pulled back out because it's the perfect whatever for whoever you're welcoming back, right?
You know, the key thing there was I begged them not to make me have the word cotter
Thank you.
in the lyric.
It doesn't rhyme with anything.
It immediately shrunk the scope of the song.
Right. Now it can be for...
No, that's perfect. It wouldn't have been a hit, probably.
It's a multi-purpose song. And people can blare it whenever somebody's, coming back from prison, what have you. It just works. It just works. It always works. So what else would you like? It's like you have a yellow ribbon, and then you have John Sebastian, and everyone is ready to come home. So what else should people be on the lookout for you? Where can they find you, and where can they enjoy what you're doing?
Where can you find me?
Yeah, I know there's johnsebastian.com, and that's got a lot of great stuff, a lot of great content.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I really don't care much about any of that stuff.
What do you think of social media, John?
I know, boy, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful to have more than one? Okay.
I think someone's texting him right now.
Alone.
He's being texted as we speak.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
You could read us the text if you care to.
Oh, come on.
Now what's happening? The dog wants to go back out. Yeah. He left something out there.
Hi, you've reached 911.
Come on.
Catherine or John. Thank you very much.
Checking on the proper mailing address for you.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
How close did she get?
It's been a call. Bye.
Bye.
That's Johanna Hall.
She sounds very nice.
Yeah. No, Johanna's very nice. And
But let me know which address is accurate because we're about to stop by.
Yeah.
All right, John, we want to thank you so much for being with us. You can go to johnsebastian.com, and you can go to Spotify, and you can find that new record that he just made with Arlen
Roth. Yes.
And it's wonderful, and it's called John and Arlen Explore the Spoonful Songbook. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Yeah, and
that's right.
Absolutely glorious. And you recorded that at home in a home studio?
No. All of that recording was done at a studio.
Okay.
What happened was we already had the basic tracks when the COVID lockdown happened, and we both went back to our well, in my case, I simply continued on at the same studio because it's blocks from my house.
Okay.
And Arlen has his own little operation. So what we began to do was pretty much what people would frequently ask of us before we did this project together, which was, okay, so we've got a pretty good take here with Larry whatever, and the only thing it really needs is a little more tinkly stuff. And so Arlen, if you just add that and then send that to us.
All right.
So, and so now we were doing it for ourselves. We were simply saying, okay, well, in this case, it's really better nude. And then there's be another thing where we go, oh no, the auto harp is gonna fill this thing out wonderfully. So let's do that.
So you just build layers. I love that. All right, well, we're going to thank you so much for being with us, and I'm going to read our closing credits. Thank you so much for joining us. We would love to continue this conversation with you on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where our show page is MediaPath Podcast, and our Facebook group is MediaPath with Fritz and Wheezy Podcast Community. You can find full video podcast episodes loaded with bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, MediaPath Podcast. You can write to us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. And if you enjoy the show, please give us a 5-star rating in Apple Podcasts and write us a review using words like sensational and illuminating. You can also talk about us on social media, send a link to your closest friends, and form a podcast discussion group. You may also want to sign up for our Fun and Dishy newsletter at mediapathpodcast.com. We are giving away cool stuff all the time, and we want you to have it. We want to thank our wonderful guest, John Sebastian. Our team includes Dina Friedman, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Mason Brown, Garrett Arch, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Planker here with Fritz Coleman. Be well and wise, and we will see you along the media path.